in Scotland. Scotland is probably better known for wind
Yes.
and for wave power. And so we are looking at what our natural resources can bring to the party. So we are investing very heavily in offshore wind turbine technology, as well as onshore wind, and in wave and tidal resources as well. So we are diversifying in terms of what the natural resources in Scotland can deliver, to make sure that we have a basket of different types of projects that are developing at the same time. We're not putting all our eggs in one basket. We're saying we need to diversify. Our targets are extremely ambitious. By the end of this year, 31% of energy in Scotland will come from renewables and resources. So that's quite a high level already. We've set our targets very high. Now we've got to be able to deliver them. So diversification is important as well.
But it's also, as an outsider, from my point of view, it's interesting to see that there are countries that don't have a lot of sunlight that are investing in solar.
Indeed.
So it's not just about the ability to enjoy the sun and so on. But the default, of course, mode is, oh, we don't get much sun, so we won't go down that path.
Right.
Whereas other people are going down that path. And really, I'm curious to see what that decision is based on. Is it just our sort of default human decision, we don't have much sun, we won't do it, or is it hard numbers that come into play?
Well, we're very much driven by the opportunity that Scotland and its natural resources represent. So if you look at Scotland and you say, where are the strongest natural resources? They are in wind. So we have 25% of potential wind power compared to the rest of Europe. That's a very significant amount. So we're focused on what we do have, and we're focusing on what we know and understand best. It's very much about saying, well, there's a lot of expertise in Scotland from the oil and gas industry, which has gone back for decades. We have a lot of engineers, architects, experts out in the UAE who are working with companies, with the UAE government, with UAE companies on that basis. So we look at where the level of expertise is in Scotland, we look at where the natural resource is telling us we have the biggest strengths, and we put those two things together to make it happen.
Okay, so we'll talk about perhaps how viable wind is versus, say, solar in a minute, but first let's delve into solar. Thierry, you work in South Africa, North Africa, Europe. What makes you decide which country is a friendly country, a good one to do business in?
Oh, it's very simple. It's the countries that don't have incentives. We don't like incentives. And put otherwise, you have two ways of looking at green energy. One is chasing incentives, and that's a non-sustainable chasing, a race which tends to be short-term. Or you want to be there for the long term, and the long term is sustainable, not only energy, it's sustainable business models. And sustainable business models comes where you have big power needs, so that's the first requirement. Where you have, obviously, a high solar irradiation, that's another one. And all that translating into higher power prices. It's true as well that if you take the example of Morocco, which imports 97% of its energy, the issue of energy independence is paramount. And so that's this combination of factors that would drive us to a country. Obviously, I would add to that the fact that you have a political framework, a vision. What is needed from politicians in due course, whether they have huge energy needs or not, is a vision. Not necessarily incentives, there again, because incentives come and go, but vision. And also tools to bring in trust, because these projects require considerable amounts of financing, and financing doesn't come if there is no such thing as trust. So trust coming through can come through guarantee mechanisms, etc. So it's, I'd say, basically a framework, but most importantly, this long-term vision of establishing a sustainable environment for these highly promising business models of selling
so if you
green
talk
energy. About
sustainability versus subsidies and incentive, what is that equation?
What we're looking, the situation that solar is in at the moment is a very strange one. It's a very interesting one, moving from a subsidy-driven business globally, where it's mostly been driven by subsidies in Europe. And then prices costs and prices have gone so steeply down, and obviously energy prices have helped us going up. And I'd say the Fukushima incident which has contributed to increasing energy prices, electricity prices in Europe and elsewhere, has also played its role. And this combination of factors means that it is now time to develop at large scale these programs without subsidies. And this is our very strong message to public and private decision makers. Put solar at the core of your energy policies, wherever you are. Obviously, if you have more energy, bigger energy needs and higher solar irradiation, you should do it first, but others as well, because it is now competitive. Provided, though, and my colleague at Siemens mentioned that.
Though,
Sure.
Bottom line is it cheaper than conventional sources of energy? This is the big thing, isn't it? Whether wind in Scotland will be cheaper than just plugging in, whether solar, wherever you are, is going to be cheaper. What about you in India?
Well, it's not actually, I would not say that it's cheaper. What you are subsidizing, what the government is subsidizing is not this, I would say is not the solar energy they are subsidizing, they are subsidizing the future. Because what renewable energy does actually save the environment. When you are saving the environment, it's for the future, you are investing in the future. With the oil or with the gas, with these things, the pollution is there at the one time, and these are very finite sources. There will be a time when there will be nothing available. So what you are actually investing, subsidizing, you are investing for the future. Whatever you are investing today in the renewable energy, either solar or wind, either investing in setting up the power plants or investing in technology development, it's future investments. So it's, I would not say that it's actually cheaper than the conventional energy, cheaper than the gas or cheaper than the oil, but it's actually future, our security for the future. Energy security is one of the things that every country needs.
But that sounds, again, wonderful, and we all, I would hope, subscribe to this idea. But the harsh reality on the ground is that the bottom line counts, and people have had to, tighten their belts with the recession and so on. So cost is a factor. Where are we now? Are we getting solar, wind, with the removal of subsidies to actually become a viable option for people, for businesses?
The right now, with the prices coming down, as I was mentioning to somebody recently, in India, the prices of solar module came down 40% in the last 4 years. So with the advancement of technology, with the growth in demand, the prices have actually started to come down, and I hope there will be a time in very near future then we could say that this is same as the conventional energy. The price of renewable energy is same as conventional energy, but that will still take some time. And since it is a technology which is, I would say, a startup technology, infancy stage technology, any technology that starts up, government has to subsidize, people have to subsidize. So subsidy is not a bad thing for renewable energy. But this, with this technological advancement, new development, new research, the prices are coming down. And there will be a time very soon then we will have the same cost, and then you will have a choice. You take solar, which is the same cost, or you take the energy coming from a conventional source, coal for example, which is pollution.
Yeah. Being in Abu Dhabi, on the one hand side, we are in that part of the world that is consuming most of the energy. So I think there are two levers that we can use. On the one hand side, we can talk about that lever where we generate power on a renewable basis, and on the other hand side, we can also have to talk about the lever where it comes to power consumption, because there you can save a lot actually by a little investment in comparison to that what you probably will have to do at the power generation side. But it all has to work together. Now, we decided to go into Master City because Master City fits into our global strategy where cities actually will be the most challenging part in the world to live. They only cover 1% of the globe, but they host more than 50% of the population and consume 70% of the global energy. So being in Master City is, for us, combining the power demand side and the power supply side to an optimized grid. And Master gives us the opportunity to use it as a greenfield lab where we can install our concepts, we can bring in our R&D resources, not only to run Master City, but to develop applications that we can carry out into the world. And Master is going to be a very important cornerstone in that development.
Because one of the issues that we've touched upon for years here in this region is the issue of you can have, again, money and intention, but if you don't have the best minds in the region and the track record and the data and all that, then it becomes very difficult. So it becomes then businesses perhaps just chasing the money, and the rest of it doesn't exist.
You're absolutely right. It is people business, and you need the talents and you need the right people to come. And therefore also what we have established with the Master Institute of Science and Technology, this is the biggest single cooperation that Siemens has got with a university. So we do a lot of funding into the Master Institute. We encourage a lot of students to go there. We fund R&D programs in smart grid, smart building applications, and carbon capture and storage. Because at the end of the day, it is people, and you have to find the right people, the right talents to develop that. It is high technology that needs the best brains. And that is one part in the world where we'll develop them and find them later on as well. So I would all invite you to come. It's a good place to be.
I have a question for those who wish to actually answer. Is it about business changing its habits, or about consumers, us, people in our own homes, changing our habits? Who are you catering for at the moment in Scotland?
I think it has to be both. I think that...
Who are you starting with? Is there a difference?
I think the difference is that the way in which a government or an investment promotion agency like Scottish Development International sets out its policy and its ambition is the thing that will drive a country and the people within that country and the individuals, the end consumers, to behave in different ways. So we have to have a strong government commitment. We have to be able to demonstrate that the government really wants to sign up to having 31% of energy consumption in Scotland coming from renewable sources by the end of this year. That's a very ambitious goal to reach. How do we make that happen, and how does that filter down into the end consumer? Well, there's a huge amount of publicity around what Scotland has to offer right now in terms of renewable energy sources. And we're also incentivising businesses to look at how they can invest more in wave and tidal energy, for example. So we have an incentive scheme which is the Wave and Tidal Energy Support Scheme, which is obligingly abbreviated as WATERS in Scotland, and that is an incentive to allow companies to invest more in that. And the more that we can do that as a government, then the more that filters down to the end user. But it does take time. There's a lead time that we need to take into consideration here. It's not all going to happen at once, but we can start to begin to drive behaviours by the way in which we shape our policy.
But again, it's this thing about business versus consumer.
What I think the consumer has to be made aware that what they are using is the energy that should come from these renewable sources. At the same time, government has to play a very important role, because it is the government which makes the policy for the country, for the future of the country. So if the government says 15, like in Scotland 30% they say, in India our government is saying 15% renewable energy by 2020. In European Union I think it's 15% by 2020. So if the government sets a goal for that 15% energy must be generated from renewable energy, then the businesses will look at, and the government will give incentive for that if you do that, and penalty if you don't do that. Then the businesses will look at from the business point of view. Consumer knows, yes, this is a good thing for the future, so I should also contribute towards it. So maybe if I have to pay 2 cents more for the renewable energy, maybe I'll pay that. And that's where the consumer has to play a role. Government has to play a role, and the business of course looks for the profit. Business always looks for the profit. But at the same time, if they know that yes, there is a profit, little less profit in this, but it's a good for the future, they will do that also.
But you see, Abdullah, here in the UAE, there's a lot of talk about big business providing perhaps incentive for that end. But when it comes to consumers, people again in their own homes, there's very little that people can do that's allowed. If you see, so for example, solar power, people here are not enabled to install panels that actually function and that they can use in the way that, say, in France or Spain or Germany or elsewhere, people can. Why have you, it seems, the government of the UAE, made this distinction?
I think it's a matter of the time and the process. You need to initiate some big projects, and these big projects, the private sector hesitate to invest in these projects. Or they will invest, but the cost will be high for the consumer.
But
So
if they want to make that choice, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? It's about choice.
I'll tell you. So as a first stage, the government should take some initiatives and should subsidize some of these projects with the partnership of the private sector. When I say that the government monopolized some services, it doesn't mean that the government initiate a company owned and managed by the government. No. It's a matter of providing the service. The government announced for a project and open the door as bidding for the private sector to participate, to transfer their knowledge and know-how to develop this project. So it's a joint venture with the private sector. Now, these projects will deliver to the consumer with a low cost in the first stage with the subsidy from the government, because these initiatives, especially with the oil producer country, it's very difficult for the consumer to get the same service from clean energy comparing with the energy coming from gas, for example. So I think there is effort should be played by the government, and these initiatives needs a source to finance these projects, and part of it should be from the consumers, but part of it should the government play the role to finance these projects. I can add another element for approaching policies for renewable energies and clean energies. I think without coalition, international coalition, and without cooperation on the international level, individual countries will not reach advanced level to transfer their economy to a clean or a green economy. Each country would like to support their private sector, their economy. And the competitiveness of this economy, comparing with other countries using non-clean or non-green sources for their economy, will not be equal. So without coalition, without international efforts, without the pressure from the NGOs also on governments, I think we will need more time.
So what do you say to that, Anne?
I would fully agree with the idea of collaboration. I think it's incredibly important, and you know, there's a much bigger agenda globally for renewable energy and clean energy. And I would argue that attracting foreign direct investment, green foreign direct investment, which Scotland is committed to doing, and if you'd asked me a year ago how many FDI projects in that space we had, I would have said perhaps one or two. Well, we've got 3 very large ones with Mitsubishi, with Doosan, and with Gamesa, and we have another 3 or 4 in the pipeline. But that in itself, you know, it describes collaboration, because these are large companies who bring their expertise, who bring their investment to Scotland, who develop the technology with some of the high-tech companies that we have in Scotland, who look at the natural resource that's there. This is about collaboration, and it's about cross-border collaboration that helps make that work.
But what Abdullah's touching upon, though, is this issue of having a level playing field, right, so that you're not penalised by having less profit or having higher overheads if you choose to go the green way, essentially,
That's right.
which would put somebody else at a disadvantage.
That's right.
So that's really what I'm asking about for your feedback about. What do you say to that?
You know, I think it is really important that that countries are not penalised by the way in which they develop this sort of agenda. So getting to a level playing field is a very noble way of looking at it. It may take some time for us to get there, but I do think that if we have a spirit of collaboration and we have common objectives that we want to achieve, then it is feasible. But it will take time.
And Thierry, from your perspective, though, you're saying this is viable business, it's profitable business. Is that
Yes, we are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you see, this is what... the
Well,
confu-
from a concrete standpoint, Solareact is, to give some data, is the second largest solar power producer in France, one of the 10 largest globally. We have installed about 120 megawatts and raised 400 million euros. So I'm talking about on the basis of experience. And we're just about to sign our first PPAs, power purchase agreements, without subsidies in France in the next few months. And that will be the case soon in these other countries. So I'm talking about experience. Now, it goes for larger installations. But what is very important, if I want to jump back on what was just said, there are two paradigms shift. One is renewables versus non-renewable is one thing. And one of the very most important thing is what you were hinting at, is decentralized versus centralized. And honestly, building an installation on a rooftop, and we've done thousands of them, is different than building a nuclear power plant. It's different in terms of how quickly it's done. It's different also in the philosophy where it's operated and done. And this philosophy could be called frugal. When you have, where you're building a nuclear power plant, an extra $1 billion is not a problem. Where you're looking at these very small installations, every single cent counts. And this is a totally different vision of bringing these infrastructures, which are small. And this is very confusing for most large industrial companies in the world to say, okay, not to say that some of them are not developing those systems that combine it, but still, this is a very different philosophy. And then I would like to compare that with telecoms. You know, if you had told people that 10 years ago that 50% of Africans would have phones, people would have laughed. Yet it was done on the basis of very simple, I'd say, large and expensive in the end infrastructures, but simple in the way it was developed, much simpler than fixed lines. And what we have here is the mobile phones of energy, i.e. a fully decentralized, much lighter source, and at the same time that requires massive, savage cost cutting. The idea behind that is that energy is not something that is just indispensable and very so indispensable that the issue of cost is not an issue. The issue of cost, and that is, lots of people think about solar or other energies as costly. What is quite interesting is that we have the ability to reduce costs in a much steeper way through this frugal innovation approach. And what is at stake is to empower people. And you were rightly pointing to the fact that it's not only, you know, centralized organizations which are going to deliver the power for the people. It's the people themselves, people being either homeowners or communities. And we're rather for the communities moving together and trying to build like community solar parks and things like that, which are bringing economies of scale. So the issue is how politically you have an empowerment of communities, and communities generate their own power, communities also learn to save power, and communities become smarter. And this is where technology and large companies like Siemens and other ones are very helpful, is where to make all that make work and satisfy the needs. And you're rightly pointing to the fact that people expect a level of service and they're not ready to have power cuts if there are clouds. So you need a system that brings technology together, that makes it possible for everyone. But there again, the very difference and change in paradigm that we have is decentralized versus centralized.
So in other words, when will we be able to install solar panels on our homes in the United Arab Emirates and do our own utilities generation if we choose to do so? That's really the quick question. I know you can't answer this, Abdullah, but that's the issue. Yes.
No, what I want to add, what you added was one of the advantage of renewable energy, solar and wind, is actually generate the energy where you need it. So if you go to a far-flung area, if you go to a big desert, you go to African countries, you go to India, very far distances, villages, which do not have the grid connectivity. They don't have the power at all. There the cost is immaterial because they are going to get power, which they do not have at whatever cost is generated, because generated there and used there. So we could think about a mini grid system or even a small rooftop system. No grid connectivity, only every roof has it. Now these are the areas which, and we are talking about right now is a big size power plants and comparing the cost of power with the conventional power. Another advantage of the renewable energy is going into these areas where there is no power. We talk about mini grid or even rooftop system, and that's where the cost doesn't really matter. The government policy matters, how the government is going to make it available for the people in that area, and the quality of service. Whatever we do, if we give them a bulb in an African village, in a hut, if we give them one bulb, that's the quality. What else they can expect from us?
I think as well, you know, I think it's a really well-made point, and the idea of communities actually coming together and looking at how they can develop, or you know, what is the benefit to community. Whilst solar is a fantastic way of going, in Scotland there's a tidal array project off the west coast of Scotland, and it's the first of its kind. It's generating enough electricity for more than 5,000 homes in that particular part of Scotland. It's about marine energy, it's not about solar, but it doesn't matter whether it's solar, whether it's marine, whether it's tidal, whether it's onshore, whether it's offshore. If the end game is about clean technology and about looking at what the natural resource can deliver to individuals and communities in a decentralised way, then that's sort of an opportunity-driven way of looking at how we develop this further.
Okay, and I'd like to actually bring in our discussants at the moment to hear what you're doing in your home countries. Can we start with you in Morocco, please? Mr. Fathallah, can you tell us, you know, a lot of money is going into... do you have a microphone, first of all? So a lot of money is going into renewable energy, and of course you don't have the oil that other nations in this region have.
Well, that's an even stronger motivation to have renewable energies. I find myself in harmony with what has been said, and Morocco can be an illustration about the way we are approaching the development of renewable energies, and Morocco has been referred to by one of our colleagues. And just to be very quick about it, we plan on having, but we have a strong political commitment to develop, and this has been mentioned earlier, a strong political commitment, and that is essential. By year 2020, we want to have 14% of our energy consumption from solar energy, in 14 from solar energy, and 14% from wind energy, which in both the total capacity would be 2 gigawatts each. That is very focused, and it is very detailed and described so that public-private partnerships can be developed through also something that has not been raised in the panel, but I'm sure it's in all people's minds. It's the diversity of the technologies within, for instance, the solar energy, because you need to have also the diversity of the technologies within it. Another point which has been raised, and we agree with it and we actually implement it, which is this decentralized approach, because we actually have it, for example, for the solar energy on 5 sites. So it's 2,000 megawatts, or 2 gigawatts, on 5 different sites, with a very pragmatic, because you keep on asking everybody, and you're right to do so, about is it doable, is it reachable, is it feasible? So that's why we have a very pragmatic approach, starting, for instance, this year with 125 megawatts in Ouarzazate, in the southern part of the country, for a specific technology in the solar energy. And we go about it because we need to be pragmatic, because we are learning also from the process. And I'm sure that by year 2020, there might be innovations, there might be other developments. So we need to be very focused on reaching our objectives, but at the same time, we need to be flexible enough to be hearing the markets and the needs of the population.
So why did you say...
May I just add one thing that is very important for a country like Morocco, which is, of course, to develop the energy production, but also to develop the industrial side of the production. Because one of the things, and when the reference was made to telecommunications, Yes, indeed, in Morocco and so many other countries, the consumption and the development of telecommunications was very strong, but not in the industry part of it. And I think that it is time for emerging countries such as ours to also develop their industries, which is a leading sector in the 21st century's economy.
So when you say 14% wind, 14% solar, how did you come up with that? Again, in terms of viability, cost, and so on,
Well,
are they the same? I mean, why have that equal equation?
If I had a 30 minutes presentation, I would explain everything. But just to say that we need to diversify the different sources of energy, going from hydraulic to coal to fuel to gas, solar, wind, and even nuclear. So we have a reality now, and we made projections based on our GDP growth, which is very strong, based on our population growth, on our GDP per capita growth, all the needs, plus, of course, the projection that we have with regard to development of our economy.
So according to current figures, will solar and wind cost you the same?
Well, of course not.
Exactly, that's really what I'm curious about. Why
Yes,
did you choose the equal
But at the same
amount?
time, does fuel, oil and gas, does it cost us the same, whether it's $80 the barrel or 150? And while you were discussing earlier about the, the subsidies of the government, and this is, in fact, what has been going on in all European countries, to take that example, for the feed-in tariff, just to make it short, where there was subsidies given by the state. Spain is a very interesting example for that. But at the same time, as we are speaking, in a country like Morocco, we are subsidizing